Everybody, Greg Pruitt here, president of the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance, and I am joined today by our political director, Christy Idaho.
Hi, everybody.
So we are in the last couple weeks of the Idaho legislative session for 2023, and we wanted to kind of sit down and talk about Second Amendment legislation, or maybe anti-Second Amendment legislation, and just kind of give everybody an update on where we are. So first and foremost, on Senate Bill 1004, the chairman, Senator Guthrie, is refusing to give the bill a hearing.
In fact, they're going to shut the committee down tomorrow or the next day, they're saying. And so we're not going to get a hearing on it. So now it's up to you guys.
Yeah. So they're ready to shut the committee down, which means they're trying to end the legislative session as quickly as possible now. And, it's here we are yet again, after 10 years of doing this, and it's still fighting tooth and nail every single year just to get a public hearing. But you can't even have a public hearing just to talk about these issues, to find out who's opposed, who's in favor.
What changes do we need to make? What do people see as problems? I would even be happy if they would come to us and say, well, this here doesn't fly, and we talked to our attorneys about this, or law enforcement about that.
Yeah.
We didn't get any of that, not any of that, just we don't want to do it. And that is not appreciating, representing, or whatever word you wanted to describe it, the will and the word of the people.
Yeah. With 1/3 of the legislature
Exactly.
as co-sponsors for Stand Your Ground expansion. 1/3 of the
The chairman of House State Affairs is a co-sponsor, and that I would, if I were him, I would see that as a major disrespect.
Yeah. And so, you got to take it, and it's not just those, 30 some odd, legislators who are co-sponsoring. They all represent, I don't know what the number is.
55,000
people.
Since recent.
So 55,000 times 32, I think, or whatever, however many we have now. That's how many voices are being silenced by Senator Guthrie, not giving this a public hearing so we can have an open, honest discussion. And in a fit of irony, so there's another bill that was just introduced by Senator Lakey, Senate Bill 1173. And
say, Bill.
Yeah, this bill came out a couple days ago. We heard about the bill. We looked at the bill, and we immediately saw some things that we were concerned about. And it's interesting because when Christy and I went and met with the pro tem, it was like, or if we go on the House side, it's like, well, have you met with Senator Lakey and have you talked to all the stakeholders?
Right. Talk to the NRA and FOP and whatever, SOE or whatever.
No, it's not a requirement for anyone to come talk to us.
It's not us. It's not Greg and I. It's you to get ours. Idaho done up.
And so when we read the bill, we're kind of like, wait a minute here. They're trying to change. If you haven't seen Senate Bill 1173, they're looking at the essentially some brandishing aspects of our law. And when we talked to our legal counsel, we all kind of came to the same conclusion that this is kind of already covered. Now, we're not necessarily opposed to making some changes to the brandishing issue, because what we're trying to figure out is, and I think what this bill is trying to look at, is how can we de-escalate some situations faster than just shooting people, right? I don't think anybody wants to. I have no desire to shoot someone.
No.
At all.
No, when you make that commitment that you think you might have to, that's a horrible feeling.
Right. I think, for me, I would love to de-escalate without getting into this issue where now I'm brandishing and now I'm going to get charged with a crime, when I was trying to de-escalate. And there was a phrase that was used in this bill that talked about the situation was justified if there was an immediate physical threat. And then I would.
But we already basically have.
What we do, but when in a gun owner's mind, if there's an immediate physical threat, there's no brandishing. I'm pointing my gun at you, and if it's that immediate, I'm probably shooting you. So it didn't really make sense to me why we were doing that. And so Senator Lakey, we sent out an email to the committee. We sent an email to Senator Lakey and said, hey, wait a minute here. This is already kind of covered, number one. But number two, this immediate physical threat thing doesn't really make sense in the context of de-escalation. If it's immediate physical threat, I'm pulling my gun, I'm drawing an auto, or I'm shooting because there's an immediate physical threat, right? So to me, if a judge or a jury is probably going to look at that immediate physical threat and go, well, they're right in your face and they're getting ready to stab you, or they've already pulled out their gun on you. So there's no de-escalation there.
Or in the hands of the wrong prosecuting attorney, this could just totally fly in the face of what we already have for stand your ground and the enhanced stand your ground that we're trying to do, because then it would lend the question, did you take the opportunity to de-escalate? And that's in Idaho code. That was one of my concerns with it is what are the unintended consequences? Because not all prosecuting attorneys are on our side. We see that more and more and more across the state. That's why we work so hard on enhancing our stand your ground, on that pretrial claim of self-defense rather than post-trial. And when I read it, but you have a lot more experience than I do, reading these laws and stuff, because you've been at it a lot more years, specifically in the guns. But that was my concern, does this open that up for a prosecution to look at that and say, well, Idaho code provides now, if this were to pass, for this process of de-escalation. Are we codifying now that you have to de-escalate or maybe prove that you had the opportunity to de-escalate before you use deadly force? That was my concern.
Yeah, and I think certainly we want gun owners to feel like they can de-escalate, right? And that's a situation where you should feel that way. But like you said, we want to make sure that we don't inadvertently turn it into a requirement where now we're getting away from you have the right to stand your ground to, well, you can stand your ground, but if you've got to go through these de-escalation.
Right, well, and that's why they showed us the retreat part of the stand your ground a few years ago is there, in some states still, you have, what they call it, a duty to retreat. If you can see that there's a way for you to get out of the situation, which oftentimes can be just as dangerous or more dangerous if you're trying to retreat and someone's trying to shoot you or beat you up with something or kill you with whatever tool they decide to. Idaho doesn't have that duty to retreat now. You can actually stand your ground, hence the name for it. But let's make sure that whatever legislation we pass now doesn't interfere with our ability to stand our ground.
Yeah, so that's a bill that I believe they're going to, Senator Lakey pulled it and asked for it to be amended, so they're going to go back and look at possibly amending it, which we obviously will have no input on.
No.
So I guess we'll wait until the next bill comes out and figure out if we have any issues with it, but that's how it works down here, folks. If you didn't know, we come in good faith every single time, despite the horrible, awful things that a lot of these folks have done to you when you were here. They ignore us completely until we have to physically come down and start protesting their stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and this year, it feels like this year there's been more and more and more, like the trespass bill. Doesn't say firearms in it, but that would directly offense.
There are no fire. It doesn't say the word gun, so now you can't talk about it, Greg. And I hear it's going to impact gun owners.
And 1163 that was heard today, it's supposed to be a bill so that cell phone manufacturers have to send the cell phones into Idaho with the filtering mechanism on to prevent pornography. If you want, you have to get a code to shut it off. But then there was a little bit in there about liability for the cell phone manufacturer. Well, didn't President Biden just say he wants gun manufacturers to be liable if someone uses one of the firearms that they build to commit murder or a crime or self-defense or whatever? So, we just have to be so careful, and we're finding more and more this year that even though it doesn't directly say firearms, we have to monitor more and more and more the legislation that's coming through, because our basic human rights, our basic constitutional rights are being infringed fast, and unintended consequences of this legislation. You set a precedent that a cell phone company can be held responsible for a child seeing pornography on a cell phone, even though the cell phone manufacturer doesn't have any control at all of what happens to that phone once it leaves their possession. That sets a precedent and opens the door for that same concept to be used with firearms or anything.
It's just ironic because these big government Republicans, they don't understand that they're setting the precedent, they're setting the standard of argument that, literally we heard it's for the children. I don't know how many times today in regard to this cell phone bill where they want to force the manufacturers to have to put the filters on for pornography. Now, 100% against pornography.
Oh,
Like,
totally.
it's an evil, awful thing that is destroying our society. But if their solution is to start regulating, and I'm like, well, wait a minute here. Minors get a hold of guns all the time. And
Minors get a hold of cars.
so, but I mean, from the gun perspective,
Right. Well,
for us,
the big,
states like Oregon, Washington, California, a lot of states are moving now to where they're forcing families, like, you have to do this with your gun. Like, if it's not in your hand and you're actively shooting it, it needs to be locked away. It needs to be doing all this, that, and the other. And so I don't understand why we couldn't do that then.
with the cell phone. Like, if you're not top of the phone, you have to have a box with the cell phone in it that has a combination lock that only sell it over 18. But that's what they're asking. It's the same concept, whether it's a gun, whether it's your car, whatever it is, your pitchfork. I read a thing the other day about 2 kids some guy murdered them with a pitchfork. So it doesn't matter what it is. As much as a gun issue, it's a private property issue and a private right issue. And it's a parent's job to watch out for their kids. And no matter how hard you try, you can't protect them from everything. You just can't. Yeah. But it's our job to make sure that you have the right to live your life as you see fit, and that your right to keep and bear arms is not infringed, no matter what direction that threat comes from.
Yeah. So other legislation, Senator Foreman has a bill that would strip the universities of regulating campus carry, which we're all in favor of. It's not going to go anywhere. It's dead at this point. Representative Judy Boyle has a bill that would prohibit the credit card companies from coding your specific purchases in regard to firearms, which is a big national issue as well that's being looked at. It was interesting in talking to other conservatives about that particular bill. There's obviously concern with where, the government is telling a private company what to do. And I'm kind of in the situation where when that private company is partnering with the government, it's not private. Like, if you're selling the government information about people, which the credit card companies have done, and they're working with government all the time, then I think you kind of lose that ability to claim that it's some private company that the government shouldn't be interfering with, because normally I would agree.
Well, but anytime your tax dollars go into a company like that, no, these private partnerships, government-private partnerships, it's a dangerous precedent, because there's a place for government, there's a place for private industry, there are lines there that should never be crossed, and your tax dollars shouldn't cross that line.
Yeah. So is the trespass bill, I know some people asked about that. I haven't seen anything new.
I have
out on the trespass.
We're watching.
See if they had addressed that. But as of right now, I don't think there's any good, solid pro-gun legislation that's going to get passed this year, based on what we've seen so far. So, which is disappointing. But next year is an election year, and that's when they'll try to ram something through that doesn't really do anything that they could take credit for, and
we'll be there.
Yeah, we'll be there. But we're going to keep ramping up the pressure all the way until the very end. On Senator Guthrie, it's in his hands. He is making the sole decision to stop our bill from having a public hearing, to where they could come out and somebody could come out of somewhere and say, this is written in a way that needs to be written differently, and then we can pass it. Okay, that's fine. We don't care.
No, we've done that.
That's fine.
We've done that before. We worked with people before. The last time we did it, of course, it got hijacked, but we've done it before. And we don't care. We don't need to have the credit, because we know that when a good gun bill gets passed in the state of Idaho, that you, the Second Amendment Alliance members, have been behind it, and you have worked your butt off, and we know that you are the ones who will deserve the credit for it, no matter whose name is on the bill or who stands up on the floor of the House or the Senate and presents the bill. It's the Idaho gun owners. Yeah. They're the force to be reckoned with. You are the ones who have made differences in elections. You are the ones that have made differences in bills getting heard. You are a powerful force, and I'm personally grateful, not only from being the political director, but from being in the legislature and having that support for this stuff. You have no idea how huge that is and the difference that it does make.
Yeah. So anyway, you guys are making a huge difference. We appreciate you tuning in today. Let us know in the comments if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. We'll keep you updated all the way through the end of the session. We'll keep the pressure up to the end.
Well, and even after the session, we're going to keep after it. It doesn't end there.
Man, we got a lot to Biden's. That's trying to start us a war or something. I don't know, but anyway. So thank you guys. Take care. God bless.
Thank you. God bless.